Marcus Chun pulled his thermal coat tighter as another gust of wind nearly knocked him off his feet. The storm had been raging for 3 days now, and his weather scanner showed no signs of it letting up. Snow whipped across the barren landscape of Kepler, 442b like angry spirits, creating drifts that reached his waist in some places. He shouldn't have been out here. Any sane person would have stayed in their shelter during weather like this. But Marcus wasn't just any person. He was a former Earth Defense Force Marine who had seen things that would make most people lose sleep for months. After 25 years of fighting in the Outer Rim Wars, a little snow didn't scare him much. What did concern him was the strange readings his motion detector had been picking up for the past hour. Something large was moving out there in the storm, and it wasn't following any pattern that made sense for the local wildlife. The native creatures on this planet were small, rabbit-like things that burrowed deep underground when winter came. They definitely weren't big enough to trigger his sensors like this. Marcus had come to Kepler, 442b 6 months ago, looking for peace and quiet after his military discharge. The planet was officially classified as marginally habitable, cold, isolated, and with an atmosphere that required some genetic modification to breathe comfortably. Perfect for someone who wanted to be left alone. He'd built his cabin near the equator where temperatures rarely dropped below -20°C, and had been living quite happily as a hermit. Until today. The motion detector beeped again, more insistently this time. Marcus checked the display and frowned. Whatever was out there had moved closer. A lot closer. According to his sensors, there were multiple contacts now, maybe 8 or 10 of them, arranged in what looked like a rough circle around his property. Marcus had learned long ago to trust his instincts, and right now they were screaming at him that something wasn't right. He pulled on his insulated gloves and checked his plasma rifle. The weapon hummed to life with a soft blue glow, its power cell showing full charge. He'd rather be paranoid and alive than trusting and dead. The wind howled outside his reinforced windows, but through the noise, Marcus thought he heard something else. A low, mournful sound that sent chills down his spine. It sounded almost like crying, but deeper and more resonant than any human voice could produce. Marcus activated his external cameras and switched through the feeds, trying to get a visual on whatever was triggering his sensors. The storm made visibility nearly zero, but his thermal imaging picked up several large heat signatures moving slowly through the snow. They were definitely alive, and they were definitely not native to this planet. As he watched, one of the shapes stumbled and fell, struggling to get back up. The others gathered around it, and Marcus could see them nuzzling and supporting their fallen companion. The behavior reminded him of wolves, but these creatures were much larger than any wolf he'd ever seen. The crying sound came again, and this time Marcus was certain it was coming from the group outside. It wasn't aggressive or threatening. It sounded desperate, almost pleading, like something in terrible distress. Marcus had spent enough time in combat zones to recognize the difference between predators hunting and creatures in genuine need of help. These beings weren't stalking him or preparing to attack. They were suffering. He watched for another few minutes, noting how slowly they moved, how they kept supporting each other when one stumbled. Their heat signatures were dimmer than they should be, indicating hypothermia was setting in. Whatever these creatures were, they were dying out there in the cold. Marcus set down his rifle and reached for his emergency medical kit. He'd patched up enough wounded soldiers to know what shock and exposure looked like even in alien life forms. These beings needed help, and despite every tactical instinct telling him to stay inside where it was safe, he couldn't just watch them die. He sealed his thermal suit and activated its heating elements, then grabbed an emergency shelter kit and some high-energy ration packs. The shelter could deploy in seconds and provide protection from the wind, while the rations would give them energy to fight off the cold. Marcus hesitated at the door, plasma rifle in one hand and medical supplies in the other. This was either the stupidest thing he'd ever done, or the most human. Sometimes, he reflected, those two things were the same. The storm hit him like a physical blow as soon as he stepped outside. The wind was so strong it nearly lifted him off his feet, and the snow was falling so hard he could barely see 10 meters in any direction. But his HUD showed the heat signatures, and he began making his way carefully toward the closest group. As he got nearer, Marcus began to make out details through the swirling snow. The creatures were indeed wolf-like, but massive, easily the size of earth bears. Their fur was thick and appeared to be naturally white or silver, making them almost invisible against the snow. But what struck him most were their eyes. Even through the storm, even with snow caking his visor, Marcus could see their eyes clearly. They were large and intelligent, with an unmistakably sapient quality that made his breath catch. These weren't just animals, they were people. The closest creature saw him approaching and let out a low, warbling call. The others turned toward him, and Marcus found himself surrounded by 8 enormous, wolf-like beings. Under normal circumstances, he would have been terrified. These creatures could easily tear him apart if they wanted to. But instead of aggression, he saw only exhaustion and hope in their eyes. One of them, slightly larger than the others and with distinctive silver markings around its muzzle, stepped forward slowly. It moved with obvious pain, favoring its left rear leg. The creature stopped just outside of Marcus's reach and made a sound that was unmistakably a whimper. Then, to Marcus's amazement, it lowered its massive head in what could only be described as a bow. Marcus had seen many things in his military career, but he'd never had an alien life form bow to him. The gesture was so clearly one of submission and respect that it took him several seconds to process what was happening. "You're asking for help," he said aloud, though he knew they probably couldn't understand his words. "You're actually asking me for help." The large creature raised its head and looked directly into Marcus's eyes. Its gaze was steady and intelligent, and Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. This being understood exactly what he'd said. Marcus looked around at the group. 2 of the creatures were clearly injured, one with what looked like a badly sprained or broken leg, and another with a gash along its flank that was bleeding slowly. The others showed signs of severe exhaustion and cold exposure. Without shelter and warmth soon, they would die. "Okay," Marcus said, setting down his rifle to show he meant no harm. "Okay, let's see what we can do." He activated his emergency shelter, and the compact device began unfolding into a dome-shaped structure large enough to hold a dozen people. The creatures watched with obvious fascination as the shelter grew, and its heating elements began warming the interior. Marcus gestured toward the shelter, then stepped inside to show it was safe. The largest creature looked at the others, made a series of low rumbling sounds that were clearly communication, then slowly limped inside. The others followed. Inside the shelter, Marcus got his first good look at his unexpected guests. They were even more magnificent than he'd realized. Their fur was thick and lustrous, with subtle patterns that seemed to shift and change in the light. Their builds were powerful but elegant, clearly evolved for both strength and speed. And their faces, while definitely lupin, had an expressiveness that was startlingly human. The injured ones were in bad shape. The one with the leg injury couldn't put any weight on it at all, while the one with the gash was losing blood steadily. Marcus pulled out his medical kit and began setting up a portable diagnostic scanner. "I don't know if this will work on your physiology," he said as he activated the device, "but let's see what we can figure out." The scanner beeped and began displaying readouts. To Marcus's surprise, the basic biological information it gathered wasn't too different from Earth mammals. These beings had recognizable organ structures, blood chemistry that responded to standard medical treatments, and nervous systems that functioned similarly to terrestrial life forms. Marcus began cleaning and bandaging the wounded creature's gash, working as gently as he could. The being remained perfectly still during the procedure, occasionally making soft, rumbling sounds that seemed to be directed at its companions. As he worked, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. Around the neck of each creature was what appeared to be a collar or band made of some kind of metal. The bands weren't decorative. They had small devices attached that looked distinctly technological. "You're not just intelligent," Marcus realized aloud. You're from a technological civilization. The largest creature, who seemed to be their leader, tilted its head at Marcus's words. Then, slowly and deliberately, it touched one of the devices on its collar with a massive paw. The device flickered to life, projecting a small holographic display in the air between them. The display showed what appeared to be star charts and navigational data, along with symbols that were clearly some form of writing. Marcus stared at the display in amazement. These beings weren't just intelligent, they were space travelers. Advanced ones by the look of their technology. What happened to you? Marcus asked softly. How did you end up stranded here? The leader touched the device again, and the display changed to show what looked like a ship, sleek and beautiful, clearly designed by a culture with advanced engineering capabilities. Then, the image shifted to show the ship damaged and falling through atmosphere, finally crashing on a snowy landscape that Marcus recognized as Kepler 442b's northern continent. You crashed, Marcus said, understanding. Your ship went down in the storm. The creature made a sound that was clearly affirmative, then touched the device once more. This time, the display showed multiple figures, clearly members of their species, inside what looked like the crashed ship. Some of the figures were motionless, while others moved slowly and weakly. There are more of you, Marcus realized. Your crew is still at the crash site. The leader's response was a long, mournful howl that spoke of grief and desperation more clearly than words ever could. Its companions joined in, creating a harmony that was both beautiful and heartbreaking. Marcus finished treating the injured creatures and sat back on his heels, thinking hard. These beings had come to him for help, but the situation was far more complicated than he'd initially realized. They weren't just asking for shelter from the storm. They needed rescue for their entire crew. The storm outside showed no signs of letting up, and even if it did, the crash site was probably hundreds of kilometers away across terrain that would be nearly impossible to traverse on foot. Marcus had a small atmospheric transport vehicle, but it wasn't designed for long-range travel in extreme weather. But as he looked around at the exhausted, hopeful faces surrounding him, Marcus knew he couldn't turn them away. These beings had traveled across space, survived a crash landing on an alien world, and somehow made their way through a killer storm to find help. They had shown more courage and determination than most humans Marcus had known. I'll help you, he said finally. I don't know how yet, but we'll figure something out. The leader seemed to understand his words, because it moved closer and gently pressed its massive head against Marcus's shoulder. The gesture was clearly one of gratitude and trust, and Marcus felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the shelter's heating system. As the storm raged outside and his unexpected guests settled down to rest, Marcus began planning. He had emergency supplies, basic medical equipment, and a transport that might be able to make the journey to the crash site if the weather cleared. It wouldn't be easy, and it would certainly be dangerous, but it wasn't impossible. Marcus had learned something important during his years in the military. Sometimes the most important battles weren't fought against enemies, but for the people who needed help. And right now, these magnificent beings needed him more than anyone ever had. The creatures had shown in their star charts and crash site. Tomorrow, if the storm passed, they would begin the journey to save the rest of their people. But tonight, they would rest in warmth and safety, and Marcus would stand guard over beings who had traveled across the galaxy only to find friendship in the most unlikely place. Outside, the wind continued to howl, but inside the emergency shelter, 8 alien beings and 1 retired human marine found something that transcended species and worlds: the simple recognition of one sapient being helping another in need. Marcus checked his supplies one more time and settled back against the shelter wall. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, at least, everyone was safe and warm. The largest creature opened one eye and looked at him for a moment, then made a soft, rumbling sound that could only be interpreted as contentment. Marcus smiled and closed his own eyes, listening to the alien equivalent of purring filling the small space. He'd come to this planet to be alone, But perhaps Marcus thought as sleep began to take him, being alone wasn't always the same thing as being lonely. Marcus woke to the sound of quiet whimpering. The storm had finally passed during the night, leaving behind an eerie silence that felt almost oppressive after days of howling wind. Pale morning light filtered through the emergency shelter's translucent walls, revealing his alien companions huddled together for warmth. The injured creature with the leg wound was the source of the whimpering. Despite Marcus's field treatment the night before, the injury was clearly causing significant pain. Marcus carefully approached with his medical kit, noting how the others watched him with alert but trusting eyes. The leader, whom Marcus had started thinking of as Alpha, made soft rumbling sounds to the injured one as Marcus examined the leg. The diagnostic scanner confirmed what Marcus had suspected. It was definitely broken, probably in multiple places. "I can set this and stabilize it," Marcus told Alpha, knowing the creature could somehow understand his intent, if not his exact words. "But your friend isn't going to be walking on it for weeks." Alpha touched the translation device on its collar, and the holographic display showed the crashed ship again. This time, additional information appeared, distance markers, and what looked like a countdown timer. Marcus's blood ran cold as he realized what he was seeing. "How long?" he asked, pointing at the timer. Alpha manipulated the display, and Marcus saw the countdown reset to show approximately 72 hours. The meaning was clear: whatever emergency systems were keeping the crash crew alive would fail in 3 days. Marcus ran calculations in his head. The crash site was roughly 400 kilometers north across terrain that included 2 mountain ranges and at least 1 major river system. His atmospheric transport could make the trip, but not with 9 passengers, and certainly not with an injured creature that couldn't walk. He looked around at the 8 alien beings depending on him and felt the familiar weight of command responsibility. During the war, Marcus had led rescue missions behind enemy lines, often with impossible odds and limited resources. But those missions had involved trained human soldiers, not crashed alien explorers on a hostile world. "All right," Marcus said, standing and activating his personal communicator. "Let's see what we're working with." His transport vehicle was a civilian model designed for surveying and light cargo hauling. It could carry maybe 4 people comfortably, 6 in an emergency. The cargo bay could be reconfigured, but that would mean no life support for passengers riding in the back. Marcus pulled up the vehicle specifications on his handheld computer and showed the display to Alpha. The alien leader studied the information intently, then turned to its companions and began what was clearly a tactical discussion. The conversation that followed was fascinating to watch. The creatures used a combination of sounds, body language, and what appeared to be subtle scent marking to communicate. Even without understanding their language, Marcus could follow the broad outline of their debate. 2 of the smaller creatures seemed to be volunteering to stay behind. Alpha was clearly against this idea, but the volunteers were insistent. One of them, distinguished by unique silver striping around its ears, approached Marcus and activated its own translation device. The hologram that appeared showed a simplified diagram of their situation: the shelter, the transport, the crash site, and the group of survivors. The volunteer creature manipulated the display to show itself and 1 other remaining at the shelter while Marcus transported the others in 2 trips. "You want to stay behind so I can take the others in shifts," Marcus understood. That actually makes sense. But Alpha let out a sharp, negative bark and moved between Marcus and the volunteer. The leader's body language was unmistakable. It would not abandon any member of its group. Marcus found himself smiling despite the gravity of the situation. "You're not leaving anyone behind." "I get it. I wouldn't either." He studied the transport specifications again, thinking hard. The cargo bay could be pressurized and heated, but it would be cramped and uncomfortable. More importantly, his emergency oxygen reserves weren't designed to support 8 additional life forms for an 8-hour journey. Then Marcus remembered something from his military days: emergency carbon dioxide scrubbers and oxygen recyclers designed for extended operations in hostile environments. He'd installed military-grade life support in his transport as a precaution when he'd first arrived on Kepler 442b. The system could theoretically support a dozen people for short periods. "It's going to be tight," Marcus told Alpha, "but I think we can make it work. Everyone comes with us." Alpha's relief was visible, and it nuzzled Marcus's shoulder in what was becoming a familiar gesture of gratitude. Marcus spent the next hour reconfiguring his transport. He removed the rear passenger seats and installed portable life support units in the cargo bay, then created makeshift bedding using emergency thermal blankets. The injured creature would ride in the main cabin where Marcus could monitor its condition, while the others would have to make do with the cargo area. As he worked, Marcus became aware that his alien companions were organizing themselves with military-like efficiency. Two of them scouted the perimeter of his property, checking for threats. Others gathered supplies from the shelter and organized them for transport. The injured creature with a leg wound insisted on helping despite obvious pain, sorting through Marcus's medical supplies and selecting items that their translation devices identified as potentially useful. It was clear these beings were not random travelers. They moved and acted like a trained crew, probably explorers or scientists with expedition experience. Marcus found himself wondering what had brought them to this remote part of the galaxy. Alpha approached as Marcus finished installing the life support modifications. The alien leader activated its translation device and showed Marcus a star chart that seemed to focus on their local region of space. A particular system was highlighted, showing multiple worlds with complex orbital patterns. "That's your home system?" Marcus asked. Alpha nodded, a gesture that was apparently universal among their species. The display zoomed in to show one particular world, beautiful and blue-green like Earth, but with distinctive ring formations surrounding it. "It's beautiful," Marcus said sincerely. "What are you doing so far from home?" The display changed to show star charts with marked routes, along with images of various worlds and stellar phenomena. Marcus began to understand. These beings were explorers, mapping unknown regions of space and cataloging new discoveries. "You're cartographers. Scientists," Marcus realized. "You're out here doing the same thing humans used to do, pushing the boundaries, exploring the unknown." Alpha made a sound that was clearly affirmative, then showed Marcus images of their ship's interior. It was clearly a research vessel, filled with scientific equipment and data storage systems. The crew quarters showed personal effects that spoke of a long journey. Images of what were probably family groups, items that looked like gifts or mementos from home. Marcus felt a deep sense of kinship with these beings. He'd spent his military career protecting human expansion into unknown space, and here were creatures doing exactly the same thing for their own people. They were explorers, scientists, pioneers, everything humanity aspired to be among the stars. "We need to get your people home," Marcus said firmly. "All of them." The transport was ready as the afternoon sun reached its zenith. Marcus had plotted a route that would take them north along the more stable terrain, avoiding the worst of the mountain passes, but adding distance to their journey. Even pushing his transport to its limits, they would need most of the day to reach the crash site. Loading the creatures into the vehicle proved to be an adventure. Despite their wolf-like appearance, they were clearly not comfortable with confined spaces. The injured one had to be carefully lifted into the main cabin, where it lay across the rear seats with its splinted leg extended. The others squeezed into the cargo bay with remarkable patience, arranging themselves efficiently to make room for everyone. Marcus was struck by how considerate they were of each other. The larger individuals made themselves smaller to accommodate their companions, and everyone adjusted without complaint. Alpha rode in the front passenger seat, its massive frame somehow fitting into the space designed for humans. Its translation device was active, and Marcus could see it monitoring the route displays and environmental readings. "You can read my navigation systems?" Marcus asked as they lifted off. Alpha touched its device, and a display appeared showing the transport's control interfaces with annotations in their alien script. Apparently, their technology was advanced enough to analyze and interpret human systems in real time. That's impressive, Marcus admitted. Your people must have encountered other species before. The display changed to show what appeared to be a galactic map with multiple highlighted systems. Dozens of them, scattered across a vast region of space. Each system showed different symbols that presumably represented different species or civilizations. Marcus felt a chill of excitement and apprehension. You're part of some kind of galactic community. There are others out there. Alpha's response was a complex display showing what appeared to be trade routes, diplomatic symbols, and peaceful interactions between various species. The message was clear. There was an entire galaxy full of intelligent life, and these creatures were part of a peaceful alliance of explorers and scientists. And with the new kids on the block, Marcus murmured, thinking about humanity's relatively recent emergence into interstellar space. The journey north was remarkable for its scenery. Kepler 442b's landscape was harsh, but beautiful, with vast frozen plains broken by dramatic geological formations. They passed over ancient impact craters filled with ice, mountain ranges that sparkled with mineral deposits, and frozen rivers that carved serpentine paths through the wilderness. But Marcus's attention was increasingly focused on his passengers. The cargo bay life support was working, but he could see stress indicators on his displays. 8 large alien beings were putting a significant strain on his transport systems. Alpha seemed to sense his concern because it activated its translation device and showed Marcus efficiency ratings for the life support systems. The alien was actually helping to monitor and optimize their survival systems during the flight. You could probably fly this thing better than I can, Marcus said with a laugh. Alpha tilted its massive head in what might have been amusement, then showed Marcus a display of their own ship's control systems. The technology was elegant and sophisticated, clearly designed by a culture that valued both efficiency and beauty. As they flew deeper into the northern wilderness, Marcus found himself thinking about the implications of this encounter. First contact with an alien species wasn't supposed to happen like this, with a crashed ship and desperate survivors seeking help from a retired Marine living in the middle of nowhere. But maybe that was exactly how it should happen. Not with governments and protocols and bureaucratic procedures, but with simple beings helping each other in time of need. The kind of contact that proved intelligence and compassion could transcend species barriers. The transport's navigation system chimed, indicating they were approaching their destination. Through the forward windows, Marcus could see a dark scar across the white landscape where something large had impacted the ground and carved a furrow through the ice. There, Marcus said, pointing at the crash site. We found them. Alpha let out a long, mournful call that was immediately answered from the cargo bay. The sound sent chills down Marcus's spine. It was clearly a recognition signal, a way for the rescue party to announce their approach to survivors below. As they descended toward the wreckage, Marcus could see the ship more clearly. It was partially buried in snow and ice, but he could make out sleek lines and sophisticated construction. More importantly, he could see heat signatures indicating life signs inside the wreck. The survivors were still alive. Weak, cold, and probably injured but alive. Marcus set the transport down as close to the wreck as he dared, then turned to Alpha. Let's go get your people and bring them home. Alpha's response was a gentle touch of its massive paw on Marcus's shoulder, accompanied by a soft rumbling sound that needed no translation. They had work to do. The crashed ship was worse than Marcus had imagined. What had once been a beautiful vessel now lay twisted and broken across the frozen landscape, its hull cracked open like an egg. One entire section had been torn away during the impact, exposing interior compartments to the brutal cold. But as bad as the damage looked, Marcus could see signs that the ship's builders had known what they were doing. Emergency bulkheads had sealed off the compromised sections, and thermal insulation was still functioning in the intact areas. Whoever designed this vessel had planned for catastrophic failure. Alpha and the others had bounded from the transport the moment Marcus opened the cargo bay, their obvious relief at reaching their destination mixing with visible anxiety about their crewmate's condition. They gathered around the main hull breach, calling out in their complex harmonic language. Answering calls came from inside the wreck, weak but unmistakably joyful. Marcus felt a tightness in his chest as he listened to the reunion taking place. Even across species barriers, the sound of people finding their loved ones alive was universal. "How many are in there?" Marcus asked Alpha, who was practically vibrating with eagerness to get inside. Alpha activated its translation device and showed Marcus a crew roster, 23 individuals total. Counting the 8 who had made it to Marcus's shelter, that meant 15 beings were still trapped in the wreck. Marcus studied the ship's structure through his binoculars, noting the way the hull had buckled and twisted. The main access hatches were blocked by debris, and several sections had collapsed inward. Getting inside would require careful work to avoid causing further structural failure. "We need to be smart about this," Marcus said, setting down his equipment pack. One wrong move could bring the whole thing down on top of them. Alpha seemed to understand his concerns. The alien leader moved around the perimeter of the wreck, examining the damage with what Marcus recognized as an engineer's eye. When Alpha returned, it activated its translation device and showed Marcus a detailed cutaway view of the ship's interior. The display highlighted the safest access routes and indicated which sections were structurally compromised. It also showed the locations of the trapped crew members. Most were clustered in what appeared to be the ship's central emergency shelter, but several were isolated in other areas. "You know the ship better than anyone," Marcus realized. "You're not just the expedition leader, you're the captain." Alpha's body language confirmed Marcus's guess. This being carried the weight of responsibility for the entire crew, which explained its desperate journey through the storm to find help. Marcus began unpacking his equipment, cutting tools, structural supports, emergency medical supplies, and portable heating units. His military engineering training had included urban rescue operations, and while he'd never worked on an alien spacecraft before, the principles were the same. "We start with the easy rescues first," Marcus explained as he set up a portable work light. "Get the healthy ones out, then work on the more difficult extractions." "Clear." Alpha nodded and began organizing its companions. Marcus was impressed by the efficiency of their coordination. Each creature seemed to have a specific role. 2 began clearing debris from potential access points, while others set up what looked like communication relays with the survivors inside. The first breakthrough came when one of Alpha's crew managed to clear a small ventilation shaft that led to the ship's interior. The opening was too small for the alien beings, but Marcus could just squeeze through with his equipment. "I'm going inside," Marcus told Alpha. "Keep working on the main access routes, but don't take any risks. I'll assess the situation from the interior." Alpha's concern was obvious, but it stepped back and allowed Marcus to enter the shaft. The passage was cramped and cold, but his thermal suit provided protection from the worst of it. Marcus emerged inside what appeared to be the ship's engineering section. Emergency lighting cast an eerie glow over sophisticated equipment that bore the elegant design aesthetic he'd noticed in the creature's translation devices. Everything was clearly built by a culture that valued both function and beauty. The sound of voices led Marcus deeper into the ship, toward the central emergency shelter. As he moved through the corridors, he marveled at the advanced technology surrounding him. The ship's systems were still partially functional despite the crash, and he could see automated repair systems working to maintain life support. The emergency shelter was a large, circular chamber filled with the alien beings Alpha had come to save. They were in rough shape, cold, injured, and clearly exhausted, but alive and alert. When Marcus appeared in the doorway, the reaction was immediate and dramatic. Several of the creatures reared back in surprise, while others moved protectively in front of what appeared to be their young. But their alarm turned to amazement when they heard Alpha's voice from outside, clearly explaining who Marcus was and why he was there. Marcus activated his own translation device, a basic model compared to what the aliens used, but sufficient for simple communication. "I'm here to help," he said slowly. "Alpha and the others are safe. We're going to get you out." One of the creatures, distinguished by intricate markings around its eyes that suggested advanced age, approached Marcus carefully. When it spoke, its translation device projected symbols that Marcus's equipment interpreted as formal greetings and expressions of gratitude. "Elder," Marcus said, recognizing authority when he saw it. "How many injured? How bad?" The elder's response painted a sobering picture. Most of the survivors had various injuries from the crash: broken bones, lacerations, and severe bruising. 3 were unconscious, and 1 had internal injuries that were clearly life-threatening. Marcus began his assessment, moving through the shelter and examining each survivor. His medical scanner worked on their physiology almost as well as it did on humans, providing vital signs and injury assessments that helped him prioritize treatment. The most seriously injured was a smaller creature that might have been adolescent, based on its size and the protective behavior of the adults around it. Its breathing was shallow, and its heat signature indicated significant internal trauma. "This one needs immediate medical attention," Marcus told the elder. "I can stabilize them, but they need to get to my transport where I have better equipment." The elder nodded gravely and began organizing the others. Marcus was struck by their discipline and calm in the face of crisis. Despite their obvious fear and pain, they followed instructions precisely and helped each other without complaint. Getting the injured youngling out of the wreck required careful coordination. Marcus used his cutting tools to widen the ventilation shaft, while Alpha's crew cleared debris from what had been the ship's main airlock. Working from both sides, they managed to create an opening large enough for the survivors to exit safely. The reunion that followed was deeply moving. Alpha and the others who had sought help pressed close to their rescued crewmates, touching and nuzzling in obvious relief. The sounds they made were complex harmonies of joy, relief, and grief for those who hadn't survived the crash. Marcus worked quickly to establish a triage area near his transport. The most seriously injured were loaded aboard immediately, while those with less severe injuries were wrapped in thermal blankets and given emergency rations. His transport's medical bay wasn't designed for alien physiology, but the basic principles of trauma treatment seemed to apply. As Marcus worked, he became aware that he was being watched with intense curiosity by the rescued creatures. They whispered among themselves in their musical language, occasionally pointing at his equipment or his actions. Alpha moved among them, clearly explaining what had happened and how they had found help. The elder approached Marcus as he finished treating a creature with a badly broken arm. "You have questions," it said through its translation device, the words appearing as both sound and holographic text. "Many," Marcus admitted, "but they can wait. Let's focus on getting everyone stable first." But the elder shook its massive head. "Our young one may not survive the journey to your shelter. You need to understand our physiology to help them." Marcus looked at the unconscious adolescent and nodded. The elder was right. His human medical knowledge could only go so far. What followed was the most intensive medical consultation of Marcus's life. The elder, who turned out to be the expedition's chief scientist, used its advanced translation systems to teach Marcus about their species' biology. Their cardiovascular system was similar to Earth mammals, but with significant differences in blood chemistry. Their nervous system was more complex, with distributed processing nodes that made them remarkably resistant to brain injury, but vulnerable to systemic shock. Most importantly, Marcus learned that the injured youngling was suffering from a condition similar to internal bleeding, but affecting organs that had no human equivalent. The treatment required precise pressure and positioning to prevent further damage. "I can do this," Marcus said after absorbing the information, "but I'll need to modify my medical equipment." The elder helped him recalibrate his diagnostic scanners and treatment systems, their combined knowledge bridging the gap between human and alien medicine. As they worked, Marcus found himself profoundly impressed by the depth and sophistication of their scientific knowledge. The modified treatment worked. After several tense hours, the youngling's vital signs stabilized and it regained consciousness. The relief among the survivors was palpable, and Marcus found himself surrounded by grateful alien beings expressing thanks in their harmonic language. "You saved them," the elder said simply. "You saved us all." Marcus looked around at the gathered survivors, 15 aliens who had crashed on a hostile world and been rescued by a species they'd never encountered before. "We saved each other," he corrected. "I couldn't have done this without your knowledge." As the day wore on, Marcus and his new allies worked to make the rescued crew comfortable for the journey back to his shelter. The transport was severely overcrowded now, but emergency modifications to the life support systems made the trip possible. Alpha remained close to Marcus throughout the preparations, occasionally touching his shoulder or arm in what had become a gesture of companionship. Marcus was struck by how natural it felt to work alongside these beings, as if the barriers of species and language were insignificant compared to their shared goal. As the sun began to set over the crash site, casting long shadows across the wreckage, Marcus took one last look at the alien ship. It had carried these beings across vast distances between stars, only to fail them at the end of their journey. But its failure had led to something remarkable: the first peaceful contact between humans and an intelligent alien species. "Ready to go home?" Marcus asked Alpha. The alien leader looked around at its rescued crew, all safe and accounted for, then at Marcus with unmistakable gratitude in its large, intelligent eyes. Alpha activated its translation device one more time, and the message that appeared was simple but profound: "Home is where you find family." Marcus smiled as he started the transport's engines. After years of warfare and violence, he had finally found something worth protecting that didn't require weapons or tactics, just compassion and the willingness to help when help was needed. The journey back to his shelter would be crowded and uncomfortable, but Marcus had never felt better about a mission in his life. He was bringing home not just alien survivors, but the beginning of something that could change the galaxy forever. Marcus's shelter had never been designed to house 24 beings. What had once been a comfortable hermitage was now a bustling refugee camp, with thermal blankets spread across every available surface and the constant hum of overtaxed life support systems. But somehow it worked. The alien survivors had organized themselves with remarkable efficiency. The less injured helped care for the wounded, while others took on tasks like food preparation and equipment maintenance. Marcus found himself learning their names through their translation devices, complex combinations of musical sounds that their technology rendered as flowing script in the air. Alpha's real name, Marcus learned, was something like First Singer of the Deep Current, which the translation device simplified to Kirin in human terms. The elder scientist was Wisdom Keeper of Seven Worlds, or Thane for short. The injured youngling who had nearly died was Small Voice Rising to Stars, which became Nova. Each name told a story, reflecting their culture's deep connection to music, nature, and exploration. Marcus found himself fascinated by the insights into their civilization that came through casual conversation. "Your people named children for their future potential," Marcus observed as he changed Nova's bandages. The youngling was recovering well, though still weak from the internal injuries. Thane, who had become Marcus's primary liaison for medical and technical matters, confirmed this with a harmonious sound that their translation rendered as agreement. "We believe names shape destiny." Small Voice Rising to Stars was named for her gift with communication technologies. She designed many of the translation systems we use. Marcus looked at Nova with new respect. Despite being barely adult by their species standards, she was apparently a technological prodigy. "She's the reason we can talk to each other." One of them, Thane, agreed. "Our people have always been explorers. We learned long ago that communication is the key to peaceful contact with new species." The conversation was interrupted by a soft chime from Nova's translation device. The youngling had been working on something for the past several hours, despite Thane's insistence that she rest. Now she activated a holographic display that showed Marcus's shelter from an external view. "She's been mapping your facility," Kieran explained, approaching with what appeared to be a cup of some kind of hot beverage. "Nova believes she can help improve your life support efficiency." The display showed detailed engineering schematics of Marcus's shelter, along with suggested modifications that would increase heating efficiency and air circulation. The proposed changes were elegant and sophisticated, clearly the work of an advanced mind. "This is incredible," Marcus said, studying the improvements. These modifications could increase efficiency by 30%. Nova made a pleased sound and showed additional displays, improvements to his transport, his communication systems, and even his food production capabilities. Despite being injured and stranded on an alien world, she was trying to repay his kindness by helping improve his life. "You don't need to do this," Marcus told her gently. "You should be resting." Nova's response was translated as polite disagreement. In her culture, apparently, receiving help without offering something in return was considered deeply shameful. She would work on these improvements whether Marcus wanted them or not. "Let her," Thane advised. "It helps her heal to feel useful, and her ideas are always worth considering." Marcus agreed, and over the next few days, Nova's improvements transformed his shelter. Working with materials salvaged from their crashed ship, she upgraded his systems with technology that was decades ahead of anything humans currently possessed. But the technical upgrades were just the beginning. As the survivors recovered their strength, they began sharing other gifts with their human rescuer. They taught him their language, a complex system that combined sound, scent, and subtle electromagnetic fields that their collar devices could detect and translate. Marcus learned that their species, who called themselves the Veilthrin, had been exploring space for over 1,000 Earth years. They had encountered dozens of intelligent species, always approaching with peaceful intent and genuine curiosity about different ways of life. "We have a saying," Kieran explained as they sat outside the shelter one evening, watching the aurora dance across Kepler 442b's sky. "The galaxy is vast enough for all voices to sing in harmony." "That's beautiful," Marcus said sincerely. "I wish my species had that kind of wisdom." Kieran tilted his massive head thoughtfully. "Wisdom comes with experience. Your people are young, as galactic civilizations measure such things. You will learn. Some of us will," Marcus agreed. "Others, well, humans have a talent for making the same mistakes repeatedly." "All species do," Thane interjected from where she was working on another equipment upgrade. "The difference is whether they choose to learn from those mistakes or repeat them." As the days passed, Marcus found himself becoming part of their extended family unit. The Veilthrin social structure was complex, but welcoming, based on shared purpose rather than hierarchy. Everyone contributed according to their abilities, and everyone was valued for their unique perspective. Marcus particularly enjoyed his conversations with Nova, whose curiosity about human technology and culture seemed boundless. She had mastered enough of his language to communicate directly, without always relying on translation devices. "Your species builds things to last," she observed one morning as she examined his plasma rifle. "Very robust construction, but not elegant." "We have a saying, too," Marcus replied with a smile. "If it's not broken, don't fix it. And if it is broken, hit it with a hammer." Nova's reaction was a sound Marcus had learned was laughter. "That explains much about your engineering philosophy." But their peaceful routine was interrupted on the 8th day when Nova's long-range communication array finally managed to penetrate Kepler 442b's atmospheric interference. The message she received sent a ripple of excitement and concern through the Veilthrin survivors. "Rescue ship," Kieran explained to Marcus. 3 days out and approaching fast. Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions, relief that his friends would be saved, but sadness that they would be leaving. In just over a week, these beings had become more than refugees he was helping. They had become family. "That's wonderful news," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice neutral. But Kieran saw through his attempt at composure. "You think this is goodbye," the alien captain said gently. "It is not." "What do you mean?" Kieran activated a holographic display that showed star charts Marcus had seen before, but with new additions. Human space was highlighted, along with several marked routes leading to various other territories. "The Veilthrin Council has been watching your species for some time," Kieran explained. "We have been waiting for the right moment to make formal contact." Marcus stared at the display in amazement. "You've been studying us?" "From a distance, and with great respect for your sovereignty," Thane clarified. "We do not believe in forced contact, but your species has reached the point where isolation is no longer possible. You are expanding into regions where other civilizations exist. So this," Marcus gestured at the shelter full of alien beings, "was all planned." "Not this exactly," Kieran admitted. "Our ship really did crash, and we really did need your help. But when we detected your presence on this world, we knew the galaxy was presenting us with an opportunity." Nova approached with another holographic display, this one showing what appeared to be official documents in multiple languages, human, Veilthrin, and several others Marcus didn't recognize. "Invitation to join Galactic Exploration Collective," she said in careful English. "Humans would be welcomed as junior partners, with full access to shared knowledge and technology." Marcus read through the documents with growing astonishment. The Galactic Exploration Collective was exactly what it sounded like, a peaceful alliance of species dedicated to mapping the galaxy and sharing discoveries. Membership offered access to advanced technology, scientific knowledge, and trade opportunities beyond human imagination. "Why us?" Marcus asked. "Humans aren't exactly known for their peaceful cooperation." "That is exactly why," Thane said seriously. "Every species has their strengths. Humans excel at adaptability and individual initiative. Your willingness to help strangers, even at personal risk, is considered rare and valuable." "My willingness," Marcus corrected. "Not all humans would have done what I did." "Perhaps," Kieran agreed. "But enough would. We have studied your species carefully, Marcus Chun. You produce individuals of remarkable courage and compassion. The galaxy needs those qualities." The rescue ship arrived 2 days later, and Marcus got his first look at Veilthrin technology operating at full capacity. The vessel was beautiful beyond description, sleek and organic-looking, as if it had been grown rather than built. It descended through the atmosphere without creating the sonic booms that human ships would produce, settling gently near Marcus's shelter with barely a whisper of displaced air. The reunion between the rescued crew and their rescuers was deeply emotional. Marcus watched from a respectful distance as families were reunited and reports were exchanged. The harmonious sounds of Veilthrin celebration filled the air, beautiful and complex. But even in the midst of their joy, the survivors made sure Marcus was included in every aspect of the proceedings. When the rescue ship's captain asked for a detailed report of the crash and rescue, Marcus found himself being interviewed by beings who looked at him with obvious respect and gratitude. "You saved 23 lives," the captain, whose name translated roughly to Stormwalker of the Void, told Marcus through his translation device. "The debt our people owe you cannot be measured." "I didn't do it for payment," Marcus replied. "I did it because they needed help." Stormwalker's response was a sound that needed no translation, profound approval and respect. "That is why we believe your species is ready for galactic citizenship." As the Veilthrin prepared to depart, Nova approached Marcus with a final gift. She had been working on it in secret, she explained, using materials from their crashed ship and knowledge gained from studying his equipment. The device she presented looked like a more sophisticated version of their translation collars, but designed to interface with human technology and physiology. "Personal communication array," she explained. "Direct connection to Veilthrin Communications Network. You could talk to any of us, anywhere in Galaxy." Marcus accepted the device with genuine emotion. "Thank you, Nova. This means more to me than you know." "You gave us our lives back," she replied simply. "Now we give you the Galaxy." As the rescue ship prepared for departure, Kieran made one final offer. Come with us, Marcus Chun. Your world will need representatives who understand what we are offering. Help us make first contact the right way. Marcus looked around at his shelter, his quiet hermit life, his carefully constructed isolation from the universe's complications. Then he looked at the alien beings who had become his friends and at the stars visible through the clear atmosphere of Kepler 442b. I think, Marcus said slowly, it's time I stopped hiding from the universe. Kieran's response was pure joy, a harmonic sound that spoke of new adventures, new friendships, and a future full of infinite possibilities. As Marcus gathered his few essential belongings and prepared to leave his hermitage behind, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just 2 weeks. He had come to this world to escape from other people's problems, only to discover that helping others was what gave his life meaning. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders he could barely imagine. But it was also full of people, human and alien alike, who needed someone willing to stand up and help when help was needed. Marcus Chun, retired Marine and reluctant hermit, was about to become humanity's first galactic ambassador. And for the first time in years, he couldn't wait to see what tomorrow would bring. The journey to the Vale-Thrin home system took 18 days aboard the rescue vessel, and Marcus experienced more wonders in that time than in his entire previous life. The ship itself was a marvel of biomechanical engineering, its living hull capable of self-repair and adaptation to different environments. The crew treated Marcus not as a passenger, but as an honored guest whose comfort and education were their primary concerns. Nova had appointed herself as Marcus's guide to galactic civilization, and her enthusiasm for sharing knowledge was infectious. She showed him how their navigation systems worked by reading the electromagnetic signatures of stars, how their communication arrays could transmit messages across thousands of light years instantaneously, and how their bioship grew food and recycled air using principles that human science was only beginning to understand. Your species thinks of technology as tools you build, Nova explained as they stood in the ship's observation deck, watching hyperspace flow past in ribbons of impossible color. We think of technology as partnerships with living systems. Both approaches have advantages. Marcus studied the displays showing the ship's internal processes, organic systems that pulsed with life while performing functions that would require massive mechanical complexes on human vessels. It's beautiful, he said honestly, but I don't understand how you discover these techniques. Trial and error over many centuries, Stormwalker said, joining their conversation. And by learning from other species we encountered. The galaxy is full of different solutions to the same problems. That's why the collective exists, Nova added. No single species has all the answers. But together, we can solve almost anything. As they traveled deeper into Vale-Thrin space, Marcus began to see evidence of that cooperation. They passed trading stations where ships of a dozen different designs docked together, space habitats that housed multiple species in harmony, and research installations where beings from across the galaxy worked together on projects that would benefit all. The diversity was staggering. Marcus met crystalline entities that communicated through controlled light patterns, aquatic beings whose ships were filled with water, and energy-based life forms that existed as patterns of electromagnetic radiation. Each species brought their own unique perspective and capabilities to the collective. How do you manage it all? Marcus asked Thane during one of their regular conversations about galactic politics. How do you keep so many different species working together? Very carefully. Thane replied with what Marcus had learned was Vale-Thrin humor, and with a great deal of patience. The key is to focus on shared goals rather than differences. What kind of shared goals? Exploration, for one. Scientific advancement. Protection of young civilizations. Prevention of galactic-scale catastrophes. Thane activated a holographic display showing various projects the collective was working on. We recently prevented a gamma-ray burst from sterilizing an entire star cluster. Took coordination between 47 different species and technology none of us could have developed alone. Marcus absorbed this information with growing amazement and humility. Human civilization was barely capable of cooperating on a planetary scale, and these beings were coordinating efforts across thousands of worlds. When they finally reached the Veilthrin home system, Marcus understood why these beings had become such gifted explorers. Their world was beautiful beyond description, a blue-green planet with distinctive rings that created ever-shifting patterns of light and shadow across the surface. But it was just one of 7 inhabited worlds in the system, each adapted for different aspects of Veilthrin civilization. The planet they orbited first was clearly an industrial center, its surface dotted with massive biomechanical complexes that seemed to grow directly from the landscape. Another world appeared to be dedicated entirely to scientific research, with space elevators connecting orbital laboratories to surface installations. A third was obviously agricultural, its continents covered with vast cultivation systems that fed the entire system. Specialization, Kieran explained as Marcus stared in wonder at the orbital displays. Each world developed its own focus over time, but they remained connected as part of a greater whole. Like organs in a body, Marcus murmured. Exactly, Nova said excitedly. You understand quickly. That is why we believe humans will adapt well to galactic civilization. The formal introduction to Veilthrin leadership took place on their primary world, in a vast chamber that seemed to be grown from a single massive tree. Hundreds of Veilthrin were present, along with representatives from several other collective species. Marcus found himself the center of attention as Stormwalker formally presented him to the gathering. What followed was part diplomatic reception, part scientific conference, and part cultural exchange. Marcus answered questions about human history, technology, and social structures for hours, while learning about the complex relationships between collective member species. The most important conversation took place with the Veilthrin Council of Voices, the closest thing their species had to a government. Unlike human political structures, the council seemed to operate by consensus rather than authority, with decisions emerging from lengthy harmonic discussions that could take days to complete. Your species faces a choice. The first voice explained to Marcus through the most sophisticated translation system he had yet encountered. You can continue expanding in isolation, competing with other species for resources and territory. Or you can join the larger galactic community as partners in exploration and discovery. What does partnership actually mean? Marcus asked. What would humanity gain, and what would we be expected to contribute? The answer was comprehensive and impressive. Collective membership would give humanity access to advanced technology, scientific knowledge, and trade relationships that would transform human civilization within a generation. In return, humans would contribute their unique capabilities, adaptability, individual initiative, and what the Veilthrin considered an unusually strong drive to help others in need. But membership is not automatic, the first voice continued. Your species must demonstrate readiness for galactic citizenship. This means developing peaceful conflict resolution, ending exploitation of your own world, and showing that you can cooperate with beings very different from yourselves. Marcus thought about Earth's current state: wars, environmental destruction, political dysfunction, and widespread distrust between nations and cultures. That's a tall order, he said honestly. Humans aren't exactly known for their cooperative instincts. No species is, initially, another voice replied. Cooperation is learned, not instinctive. But you have individuals like yourself who show that your species has the potential. I'm just one person, Marcus protested. I can't speak for all of humanity. No, the first voice agreed. But you can speak to humanity. You can help them understand what we are offering and what it will require of them. What the council was proposing was remarkable in its scope and ambition. Marcus would return to Earth as humanity's first official contact with galactic civilization. He would work with human governments, scientists, and cultural leaders to prepare for formal first contact. Most importantly, he would help humanity understand that they were not alone, and that their future lay in cooperation rather than conflict. It won't be easy, Marcus warned. Humans are suspicious of outsiders, especially ones who look different or have superior technology. Some will see the collective as a threat rather than an opportunity. We know, the first voice said gently. That is why we need someone they trust. Someone who has proven himself capable of putting aside fear and prejudice to help others. The next several weeks were intensive preparation for Marcus's return to human space. He studied collective history, technology, and protocols until he could explain the basics of galactic civilization to anyone who would listen. More importantly, he learned about the challenges other species had faced during their integration into the collective. Every species struggles with the transition, Nova told him during one of their study sessions. The key is patience and persistence. Change takes time. Marcus was also equipped with technology that would help him in his mission. The communication device Nova had given him was upgraded to allow real-time consultation with collective experts. He received portable medical scanners that could treat injuries in any known species. Most importantly, he was given a small transport vessel of Veilthrin design, not advanced enough to give humanity an unfair technological advantage, but sufficient to prove as the time for his departure approached. Marcus found himself surprisingly emotional about leaving his new friends. Over the past months, the Veilthrin had become more than allies or teachers. They had become family in a way that transcended species boundaries. This is not goodbye, Kieran assured him during their final meeting. We will remain in contact, and when your species is ready, we will meet again officially. What if they're not ready? Marcus asked. What if humanity rejects the offer? Then, we wait, Kieran replied simply. The galaxy has existed for billions of years. We can wait a few more decades, or centuries if necessary. Nova presented Marcus with one final gift, a small crystalline device that looked like jewelry, but contained a complete library of collective knowledge. Everything we know about science, philosophy, art, and culture, she explained. Not to give humans an unfair advantage, but to help them understand what they could become. The journey back to human space gave Marcus time to think about the enormous responsibility he was carrying. He wasn't just delivering a message. He was carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire galactic civilization that believed humanity could become something better than what it currently was. When Earth finally appeared in his transport's viewports, Marcus felt a complex mix of emotions. The blue-green world looked so small and isolated after months among the stars, but it was still home. And now it was up to him to help his species understand that home could be much larger than one small planet. His arrival in Earth's solar system caused an immediate sensation. His Veilthrin transport was detected by military sensors long before he reached Earth, and by the time he entered orbit, every major government on the planet was demanding explanations. Marcus smiled as he activated his communication systems and prepared to make contact with Earth Defense Command. After months of learning about galactic civilization, he was finally ready to teach humanity that they were no longer alone. Earth Control, this is Marcus Chun, retired EDF Marine, aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony's voice, he transmitted. I have a message from the Galactic Exploration Collective, and I think you're going to want to hear this. The response was immediate chaos on the communication channels, but Marcus remained calm. He had learned patience and wisdom from beings who had spent centuries building bridges between species. Now, it was time to build the most important bridge of all, the one that would connect humanity to the stars. In his cargo hold, Marcus carried gifts from across the galaxy, proof that intelligence and compassion could transcend any barrier. In his memory, he carried the knowledge of civilizations that had learned to work together for the common good. And in his heart, he carried the hope that his own species could rise to meet the challenge of galactic citizenship. The future is going to be interesting, Marcus reflected as Earth grew larger in his viewports. But for the first time in his life, he was genuinely excited to see what tomorrow would bring. After all, tomorrow might just be the day humanity learned to sing in harmony with the rest of the galaxy.